to one of those. I'm not sure which one or all. You said 2. All right, 6:06. The rocket is going to launch. Huh? Is that about right? I've wasted enough of your time.
Hey, one question is, has Garmin shown any interest in TrickTracks, or do they even know about it?
I would guess somebody at Garmin has seen it, but nah, they haven't shown. It would be kind of, I don't know if it'd be competitive, but it would be something they don't want to fool with. Yeah.
All right.
Nah, it's not. Nah, it's you know, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a marginal thing on the end of a big galaxy somewhere. It's an unvisited planet for most stargazers. All right, so I've got this the document that is linked in the Facebook group. This is exactly what you're seeing, and I've got some links that I posted in here. There's a few, I wouldn't call them support files. There's a GPX file I'm going to be using to show you this stuff. Link to the TrickTracks page, which we're going to go over all this. There's a link to the TrickTracks video help, the YouTube, I should say YouTube there. In case if you want to find all this stuff, I've linked it. There's a big long written help file, which is you know, there's a lot there, but sometimes it's handy to see like the waypoints and stuff. You can actually look at them and see them, that this waypoint does this, because I explain it. I don't do that. You know, the videos are kind of short, so I try not to go that deep into them. Let's see. Okay, so a couple ground rules, and I think it's going to be pretty cool. There's only 15 people, but I would say just stay muted or stay quiet until I pause and say, hey, questions. And I'll try to do that often. If I go too long without asking for questions, then just butt in. But otherwise, you know, kind of just stay muted or wait. All right. So the webinar tonight is about TrickTracks, the software, the custom software that I wrote for Garmin to make navigation easier, mostly for road or for off-road riding. I use it on the road, but it's mostly when you're in a situation where the bike's shaking around, you're moving, and you need to be able to quickly look down at your Garmin and or your GPS and see whether you're going the right way. And I'm going to talk about the kind of the what is TrickTracks, the why, and the how. And that's the 3 big topics. I'm not going to talk about Basecamp or anything. You'll see me I'm going to really quickly go into Basecamp and just show you the process of getting a track out of it. But that's not the intent of this. I'm glad to answer a few Basecamp questions, but I don't really want to spend a lot of time on that. So any questions real quick on kind of the why we think we're all sitting here? All right. So what is TrickTracks? Oh, and I should point out one thing. The Facebook group is called TrickTracks also. They're not in any way related. I mean, I just used the same name. The Facebook group is meant to get people together to ride and you know, talk about riding and go riding. And this thing here we're talking about tonight is a piece of software is to help you put maps on Garmin. So don't get confused, even though the damn name is exactly the same. So TrickTracks is a piece of software that I wrote. You see it as a web page that lets you take GPX, GDB, KML files and drop them onto the web page. I'm going to show you all this. And out it spits out, it does some churning on that, and it spits out a Garmin map file. And that file then can get loaded onto a Garmin device and will show as these funny lines and symbols. So I highlighted there in yellow, it's Garmin only. I do it for other devices, but I don't want to spend the time. And Garmin has been reverse engineered enough by people, especially the OpenStreetMaps people, that give away free maps for Garmin's. And so they supplied some tools that anybody could use to build Garmin maps. I took those tools and kind of welded everything together on a website, and that's what TrickTracks is. So TrickTracks produces these maps for your Garmin that have these things I call fat lines. Here's an example of a fat line. It's pink line. It's got chevrons in it that show you the direction that the track is going. And usually you go the same direction. Sometimes you reverse it. The chevrons are nice. If you get off track, especially if you're in the woods or in the dirt, you get turned around and then you tee back into the route, you know which way to turn. And sometimes that, not always, but sometimes you don't know which way to turn. Waypoints in a GPX file turn into these target looking thingies here. This is a little bit messy, but they're shaded circles. And there's different sizes of these targets that you can cause to be drawn by using a different waypoint. I'll show that in Basecamp. So this is a single quarter-mile target. It's a quarter-mile from the center to the edge of the ring. There's half-mile and 1 mile targets. I don't usually use them. That like a 1 mile target's huge. And how you choose a target is just like how important it is, or how fast are you riding in that section. You would need a bigger target if you're riding 60 versus if you're riding 15 miles an hour. Newer versions of TrickTracks auto-generate these hexagons with mileage in them. So every 5 miles, it generates this shaded hexagon, says mile 15, and then in brackets, I don't know if I've released that, in brackets, it shows the miles remaining on that track. So you can kind of count up and count down at the same time. TrickTracks honors the GPX line color. So if you've assigned a line color to a track, it will use that in generating the fat line. And almost any complexity of GPX file is supported. I mean, you could have hundreds of tracks of almost any length in a GPX file, and TrickTracks will build the map for that. I've built them with literally hundreds of tracks and thousands of miles. So any questions about the what? I'm going to get to the how and the why next, but like what this is. So any questions there? Okay, I must be giving a hell of a seminar. Pull that.
Hey, Scott, I got a quick question for you.
Sure.
Some of the major routes that you've already traveled, do you have some of those tracks that we could use instead of having to recreate them all?
It depends. Every ride that I ever publicly announce, I mean, virtually every ride I ever publicly announce, I give you the tracks, the GPX tracks, and the TrickTracks maps for. They're always posted, in a Google shared folder. For that ride, you can get them. On a rare occasion, if it's an area that's more sensitive, like, we don't want 500 people riding there because it's going to whoop it out or something, I'll give you the tracks and the TrickTracks on the day of the ride. But that's about 1 out of 20 rides I do that. So if there's a ride that you remember that you didn't get to go on, but you remember, hey, I remember this thing you posted, I'll just point you to that folder, and you can do whatever you want with them. So
Thank you.
Yeah, and if people approach me one-off and say, hey, do you have a track for this area? A lot of times I'll go find something and give them to them, but I'm pretty open. But there's certain things, like I just spent 30-40 hours on this Baja thing. I'm not going to publicly dump that out there. Just A, it's too much, and B, it's, I spent a lot of time on it. So a little bit of history first of how did I get here and with this TrickTracks thing. Some of you've heard of GPS Kevin, probably. He leads, I see somebody laughing there. Doug Gordon, you're muted. So whatever you're laughing about, I can't hear it. GPS Kevin has been leading group rides for, I don't know how long, maybe at least 10 years, I would guess, maybe longer. And you can Google him. He puts together some pretty good rides. A lot of people disparage him, but the truth is he does a good job at most of his stuff. He usually sets up all the hotels, all the tracks. You show up and you ride each day. You got a room, and it's like $100 a day. I mean, you can't really beat that, right? And so you maybe a little more, maybe 125, but you show up with a bike and you get a pretty decent ride. He gives you options on that. Those rides of kind of the nominal route, some hard routes and some easy routes. And so I started out about 5 years ago. I got back into riding. I did a bunch of his rides. And then short story is, my personality is smooth and easygoing. Well, he and I got into it about something, and he decided that I didn't belong in the clique. So we unclicked. And but Kevin used to give away, or not give away, but when you went on one of his rides, he gave you a chip that looked almost like TrickTracks. And that's how he did it. That's why he's called GPS Kevin. He sort of early days figured out how to build a map for a Garmin that was kind of mindless. Just follow the line. Wherever he wanted you to go, you went. And I liked that so much. I kept asking him, hey, Kevin, why don't you give away the tracks? Why don't you let us do our own thing? And he felt that that was his proprietary secret sauce. And, I'm a software guy. That's what I did for a profession before retirement. And that became a challenge for me. I went and spent a couple months, figured out how to do it, and then said, well, touche, I'm going to give it away. I'm going to make it public. And it's a lot better too than his. He's not a software guy. He paid somebody 10, 15 years ago to do it. So his is much more primitive. It does work. I don't want to disparage it too much, but I can spend time and polish mine. So that's how it came to be. Kevin had it. He wouldn't give it away. I wanted it. I wrote the software. So I don't charge anything. I have a few ride promoters that actually use it now. Some of the guys on LA B2V use it. Alexander Smith, the guy, Malcolm Smith's son, puts on these killer Baja rides. He uses it for his riders. It's fun. I enjoy, this is one of my give backs to riding. I love it so much. All right, so the why. The why I've sort of touched on. When you have TrickTracks on your Garmin, you can pretty much ride in almost any conditions and still see the line. And the idea when you're riding is look down. Do I see a line? If I don't see a line, I got to stop and figure out where the line is. If I see the line, I'm good. And I just keep riding. So you get into a pattern of riding along, even in the dirt, whoops, turns, trees, and you just glance down for a fraction of a second. If you can see the line, you're good. If you can't, you adjust. So the idea is that you ride and don't fiddle with navigation. You just ride and follow the line, and you're not stopping, you're not fiddling around, you're just riding. The targets give you a way to signal to your riders there's something coming up. Hey, there's a critical turn, there's a safety hazard, there's a meeting point. Kevin used to use, he called them donuts. He used them as meeting points. So riders would get together and say, hey, let's meet at donut 34. And then they ride no matter where they got lost and everything else. They just meet at donut 34. Targets are a way to have that meeting points and critical things. Another thing that's really critical about TrickTracks is if you take a complicated GPX file that's got 20 tracks in it, even for a one-day ride, I have GPX files that have 20 tracks with spurs and options and things like that. If you load that into a typical Garmin, you get sort of one of two options. You either get no tracks display at all, and you've got to scroll through a long list and turn them on and off, and you got to know what their names are. And I need track 3 and track 9. So that's a pain in the ass. The other option is they might all be on at once, but finally, there are these generally very, very thin lines, and they're hard to see. The waypoints appear as little flags and crap. So that's just a big thing, is that TrickTracks lets you see all those tracks kind of like pickup sticks. If you zoom in, I'm on the green track. Hey, I'm going to stay on the green track, but it crossed a red and a yellow. I know to stay on the green. So it makes it easy to see these complicated ride situations and to navigate it just by kind of zooming in and out and looking at it. The other thing is since it's a map overlay, It's not a track. It's like a topo map. That's kind of what TrickTracks is like. A topo map has a lot of little lines. Well, TrickTracks just has a couple of fat lines. It's always there. The Garmin doesn't interpret it any way. It just displays this map that happens to have a fat line on it and some targets. So the GPS is not getting involved. It's plain stupid. There's no, rerouting. There's none of that. It's just a line on the screen, and the device doesn't care or know about it really. It just displays it as pixels, as dots. Shows the direction. I already mentioned that. Really handy if you get confused or turned around. It's easy to have a complex set of tracks visible. The other thing is, often I have multi-day routes, or I'll have a route that is a figure 8. So there'll be a part A and a part B track, or map, I should say, or track, but then gets turned into a map. I'll split that into map A and map B. And on the Garmin device, you can easily enable map A and disable map B. And when you get to the end of A, you just say turn on B and turn off A. So it's a very easy way to take multiple tracks for half the ride and multiple tracks for the other half of the ride and turn them on and off any way you want. You can have, 10 different groups of tracks that have been turned into a TrickTracks map and just select them. I want the hard options only to show, and because I made a TrickTracks map like that if I chose to do that. So it gives you a lot of options in the sense of not having to tell riders, oh, there's these 13 tracks for part A and these 15 tracks for part B. You just say turn on A and then we'll ride half the day, turn on B, we'll ride the second half of the day. So what's not to love? Well, there's a lot of things. First of all, as I mentioned, a TrickTrack is a fat line, but nothing else. The device knows nothing about it. I call them dumb lines. So Mike, to your question, can you make it speak to you and tell you, hey, there's a right turn coming up or there's a left turn? No, you can't. The device doesn't even know anything. It's just like a topo line. It's just or like a lake, a device doesn't say lake ahead. It's just a blue polygon. So you don't have any routability, and you don't have any intelligence that the device can help you with. The second thing that's bad is it's Garmin only. It doesn't work on iPhones. It doesn't work on TrickTracks. It doesn't work on any of these. And the reason it's Garmin only is because Garmin's the only manufacturer that people have reverse engineered to make this happen. Garmin sucks in a lot of ways, but it's what we got. So let's see. The other problem with it is, if you call it a problem, is it only works with tracks, not routes. And for people who are kind of new to making their own, lines from point A to point B, a lot of times they'll use Basecamp or Google Maps or something, and they'll draw this fancy thing. That's called a route. And a route is pretty useless because let me give you a real quick example if you're unfamiliar. If I tell Google Maps to give me a route from San Francisco to New York, who knows what I'm going to get, right? God only knows where it's going to go. It'd probably go Highway 80 or Freeway 80. But if I take those 2 points and plug them into a Garmin device that has a different map in it than Google Maps, it's going to route me differently. And maybe it's going to say, I'll throw in a few dirt roads just for kicks. So the point is a route does not describe a very precise set of directions. A track, on the other hand, is also called breadcrumbs. It's the opposite of that. All it describes is points, and the device just draws a line between each point, each 2 points. And that's all it is. So it's even more mindless than a route. A track can't be routed in a Garmin device. You can't tell your GPS follow a track. It doesn't. It says I don't know how to do it. TrickTracks requires tracks. It requires these things called tracks. So if you have a route, it can be turned into a track if you know how in Basecamp. But if you only know about routes, or you submit a route to TrickTracks, it'll spit it out and say, sorry, I don't know what to do with it. So You got to deal in tracks. Can be the other, okay, so it's got to be tracks. TrickTracks can be awkward for new users to figure out how to load the TrickTracks maps into the device. I probably 95% of my time helping people is, how do I get this file that TrickTracks generated or that I gave to them? How do I get it into my Garmin device? So that's a little awkward. Already talked about it. There's no turn-by-turn, no audio. It's you following a fat line. And I think it's not for everyone. Some riders hate or refuse by Garmin. Some riders insist on voice commands, you know, turn left in 300 feet. This is not that. This is primarily made for riders who want to ride in situations where, you know, Google Map is not available, or you're riding off road, or where there's no tracks at all. You're doing satellite stuff, you know, and you're drawing things. So any questions on the why? You know, why would you use this, and also why would you not want to use it? That's a long soliloquy there. Anybody good? Everybody good and understand what and why now? So I'm going to jump into the how. So as I mentioned, you have to have a track or a GDB file or a KML file, but in the end, it boils down to the same thing. It boils down to a set of points that describes the path that you want to follow. So I'll use the word track to mean that, even though TrickTracks accept GDB files and KML files. If you submit anything else to TrickTracks, it's gonna complain and say, give me a track, please. There's, how do you get tracks? I think one of you asked me, hey, Scott, can you give me your tracks? You either find a track on the internet, you get it from a buddy, or, you know, you make your own, yeah, or a combination of all of those. Gaia, let's see if, I don't see him there. Mike Powell was on earlier. Gaia, if you go there and zoom in, you'll see tracks for almost anywhere you could possibly ride. You can click on those and get a GPX file. That becomes a working track for you. And a lot of off-road stuff. It's amazing. Gaia made a mistake a year ago or something and took everybody's tracks and made them public. So if you've ever ridden and had Gaia on your phone, it tracked you the whole time. And when you got home, it loaded them without even telling you. So all these secret places are all tracked. You can go anywhere in the middle of Baja and find tracks going through places where there's no roads. So there's a hint there of where you might find tracks. But every place I've ever ridden remotely, even in California and Nevada, you can find tracks through these strange places. So in any event, you get your tracks, and so I'm going to show you just really quickly. I'll just bring up a base camp and talk about what a basic track looks like. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Let me turn this down a little. So this is nearby where I used to live. I've got a couple of tracks here. I've got a maroon track. I've got a green track. If I zoom in a little bit, I've got some waypoints. I've got these round circles that are waypoints. And okay, so that's what I got. So these green circles, they generate the quarter-mile target. If you use that kind of waypoint, it'll generate a quarter-mile target. If you use a blue circle, and this is all documented in the videos and in that link that talks about the written documentation, these will generate a half-mile target. So it'll be a half-mile and a quarter-mile. It's 2 rings in the target. And the red generates a 1-mile target. So it'll go 1 mile, half-mile, quarter-mile. And there'll be different color rings. So that's a huge target. So how do you change a waypoint? I mean, if you double click on it, let's see, where did that go? I don't even see where that went. I can't see it. Hold on, I'm looking. I didn't try this beforehand. Oh, hold on. Okay. So if you double click on a waypoint, in Basecamp, it'll bring this thing up, this dialog. And here you can select the waypoint type. So it's these 3 waypoints, only these 3 that really matter. If you select any other waypoint, TrickTracks will just turn it into a 1/8 mile target, a little teeny target. There's 3 other special ones, these triangles. I'm not going to talk about them a lot. These generate warning markers. They generate these things in advance. As you're riding along, you'll see these warning triangles and all kinds of stuff. I would tend to avoid them. So you really got 4 things. You've got the red, the green, and the blue, and then everything else will generate a smaller target. Whatever the label is on the waypoint, that shows up in TrickTracks in the middle of the target. And we'll see that in a minute when we look at one. So for me, how do I do these all? I'm going to move this off the screen, but how do I decide where a waypoint goes? Well, I'll zoom in and I'll say, oh, hey, here's this black track is coming into this maroon track. I'm going to hit the W for waypoint and I'll drop a waypoint right there. It happens to be a car, so I'll double click on it and change its type to be, whatever I want. I'll make it a green, and maybe I'll say, help or something. And that will become a waypoint on my track, and it'll show up in TrickTracks. So now I'm happy. I've got my great route that I've designed in Basecamp or somewhere else. I'm going to click over here, go up to File, Export, and I'm going to export this thing. And I've already done it, so I can do it again. But and it's going to generate a GPX file on my disk. Okay. So any questions about that? I know I went real quick. I'm not trying to show Basecamp too much. I created the tracks, put the waypoints on, and then exported that thing, which happens to be this list, onto disk. Any questions there real quick?
Well, I have one.
Yeah.
On the version of TrickTracks I used, when we were coming up to the checkpoints and bonus checkpoints, there was decreasing circles. Does this do that?
Yeah.
So if I chose a red one,
yes,
which is a mile, does it
yes,
have circles within it?
yes. And I'll show you those. I think I will. Yeah. So the green one generates a single 1/4 mile ring. The blue one generates 2 1/4 mile rings. So that's a 1/2 mile, and a 1/4 mile. And the red one generates 1 mile, 1/2 mile, 1/4 mile. So that'd be 3 rings as you're riding into the target. I'll show you those on the screen. Okay. So did I get that? Mike, you good on that?
That explains it.
Okay.
So
yeah.
all the ones that we used were the red one.
That's right. When I gave you those, I made them all red so that you wouldn't miss them. All right.
I did miss 1 or 2, but
yeah, well, you just got to remember that at least in Basecamp, if you use these kind of waypoints, what they do, green is, 1/4, blue is okay. And then every other waypoint is going to be a littler circle. All right. So I'm going to get out of, I'm going to minimize Basecamp here. Let me see if I can go find where that file is. Okay. So now I'm in Windows Explorer, and I'm looking at that folder. And this is the GPX file that I exported. And, it's not very useful on Windows. I mean, I can look at it in a text editor, but it's not going to be very useful to me. What I'm going to do is drop this into TrickTracks. And the way I do it is I get 2 windows up. Let me see if I can find, okay. So I've got a little TrickTracks window here. And we can talk about this screen in a minute, but I'm going to take this window and I'm going to take that GPX file. I'm going to drag it over to this green and I'm going to let off. Okay. It'll say processing and it'll download it. And sometimes it will say, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to let you download that file. That's a bad file. You'll have to say it's okay. And the reason it does that is because these files end with .img. And .img in Windows world and Macintosh world can mean it's a operating system file, basically. And so the operating systems get a little touchy about people downloading critical binary files that can be viruses and stuff. So, it doesn't matter because you're not going to run this file on your Mac or your PC. You're not going to do anything with this file on your Mac or PC. You're just going to copy it to a Garmin. So even if I, Scott Taggart, was evil and tried to put something in there that would take over your Mac or your PC, you're not going to do that. You're not going to double click on that file. You're not going to try to run it. So, it doesn't even matter if there was something nefarious in there. All you're doing is putting it on your disk and then copying it to a Garmin. You're not trying to run it. So, so any questions there? If you forget, let's talk real quick. Actually, I should go through this because I do it all the time. If you're a first-time user to TrickTracks, let's drag this over here, and it's going to say, where's your access code? It says enter access code. You need an access code. All an access code is I think it's a 5-letter code. I only have this here because I don't want all the foreign nefarious people hitting this web page repeatedly with their garbage files. So you can obtain one free. You click here and you enter your name, which can be anything. I don't care what it is, and an email. And the email has to be valid because it's going to send you the access code. And again, the access code is just, ABZXQ or something. You can use that code forever. If you forget it and you enter the same email again, it's going to send you the same code. It's just a really simple key system. It's different for each of you. Your access code's always different. So that's what that is. It's just to keep people from dropping all their garbage on my website and trying to break my website. So, and also it lets me know who's using it. So if you enter your access code and you're, Doug, then it says Doug submitted a file today to me. So, so you get your access code in the mail and write it down somewhere, and you just type it in here. And then from then on, when you drop your GPX file, it won't ask you for that. It says drop one file at a time. In theory, you can drop multiple files at a time, but it doesn't work very well. So please just drop one at a time. If you have 50 to do, good for you. You can get help at any time. If you click here, it takes you to YouTube. It takes you to the YouTubes that I did, and the YouTubes really kind of just talk about what we're talking here. What is it and how do you do it and how do you load it on your Garmin? So that's all the help file does, is take you to the YouTube things. Can of course always donate money. Configuration. I'm not going to go a lot into that, but this button will let you change the way the TrickTracks maps look or behave when they're generated. So I'll quickly talk about this. So if you click these little pluses and minuses, they expand and shrink. So you don't have to be scared. You can't break anything, but your maps may come out differently if you mess with these. The tracks, the default width on the track is 16 pixels, and that's usually a pretty good number. On some devices, that's too thin, like on the Zumo XT, I think it comes out too fat if it's 16. So you could, in theory, change that to 12 or whatever. If you really get into that, you can change the arrow style. There's a bunch of them. And I actually have one for the Zumo because the Zumo is so weird that it squishes the little chevrons together. So you can experiment with that if you have a Zumo. This little option is, it says don't force the track line color. What that means is honor the color that's in the GPX file. So if you had a red track, a green track, and a blue track, TrickTracks will keep that. If you set this here, say to blue, all the tracks are going to be blue. Even no matter what's in the file, it's going to force them to be blue. Maybe you want that, I don't know. And finally, if you click this, all the tracks will be reversed in their direction. So that's kind of neat if you have a ride that you did one year and you want to just reverse it all. If you don't have to go into Basecamp and flip all the tracks around. You can just click this and it'll flip them all around. For 99% of the users, you never touch any of this stuff. I never even touch it. So yeah, anyway, so that's tracks. Mileage markers, you can turn them on and off. You can set when they happen. 5 miles is the normal. You can set what it says before it. Like it says, you saw it said mile 5 in that one or whatever I showed. You can make it say, hello 5 if you want. You can set the number of rings on that hexagon for the mileage marker. Normally it's just 1. You can set the diameter of that hexagon for the mileage marker. Normally it's 400 meters. I don't remember what this transparent does. So these set what the line color is on the outside of the hexagon. This sets the shading of that hexagon. Again, you're just fiddling with the looks of those mileage markers. Targets, how much are they shaded? The default is a medium shading. You could set it to light or heavy shading. So when you see a target on the screen, it's going to be shaded differently. You can set them to none. So you'll just get the ring, but no shading. There's a little teeny circle in the center. You can turn shading on or off of that. Let's see. Remember I said that there's 3 types of waypoints, the green, blue, and red circles, and everything else was okay. You can set what everything else does. Right now, everything else generates 1 ring. And I don't think it's maybe it is 400 meters. But you could set it to do 10 rings if you wanted. So that those unknown waypoints, you have a little bit of control over. Generally, you don't want unknown waypoints to do too much. You want them to be sort of subtle. You'll know if you make a mistake because your whole map will be covered with target rings. Warning markers, we're not going to worry about that. That's those triangle things I talked about. And in diagnostics, this is if something breaks, I'll tell you to enter something in here, and I'd help you debug it. Pretty much never go in there. So really, the things you fool with the most really are usually how the tracks look. Sometimes people turn off the mileage markers. They don't like them. And sometimes they fiddle with targets, but not too much. Any questions on that, on the configuration stuff? All right. So I already showed you drag and drop. You can, if you're on a phone or something and you're desperate, you can select this button and then go find a file. Instead of drag and drop, you can, kind of go and click a file here and use the old-fashioned dialogues to get the file instead of, okay, see, it says, do you want to keep this file? And I'll say keep. Oh, you guys can't see that. Hold on. There. Hold on a second. I'm struggling here. There we go. Let's see. Give me a second. I'm trying to get this screen to show up so you can see it. See right at the bottom, it says, this type of file can harm your computer. Do you want to keep it anyway? Do you want to keep TrickTracks, blah, 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 anyway? Keep or discard. If you discard it, it's just not going to get downloaded. And if you say keep, then it'll just put it in your downloads folder. Another thing that I know people have troubles finding is where did they go? If you right click on any, at least in Chrome, if you right click on any downloaded file, there's you can't see it. It says show in folder. And if you show in folder, then the downloads folder will open up and you can see all the downloads you've done. I usually set my downloads folder to be sorted by date so I can see the newest at the top. That's a little trick there if you have troubles finding downloads. Usually the browsers also have a way, I can't see it here because my thing's so damn wide. Oops, sorry, hold on. Right here on Chrome, at least, you can open the downloads folder and it'll show you what's in your downloads. So in any event, okay, so we've magically created a TrickTracks map file. How do we get it on a device? How do we see it? Any questions first? I know I'm going fast. All right. So we created a track file somehow, or we got a track file somehow. We ran it through TrickTracks. We got a map file, Garmin map file, and now we're going to put it on the device. Okay. So let me see if I can get that working here. Okay. So I use Windows E on Windows to bring up the Windows Explorer. That's what I hit right now. I hit Windows E at the same time, and it brings up my device, shows me all my disks. I plugged in my Garmin earlier, and my Garmin shows up as Garmin Montana 650T. It also it shows up twice. Don't ask me why. That's Windows for you. And it also, I have a external SD chip card in my Montana that happens to be named Mont EXT. You can name that anything you want, but you know, you got to know what's your device is. So my device consists of this internal thing and this external chip. And if I click on it on the right, it shows me what's in the device. If I click on the chip, it shows me what's in the chip. And under each of these, you'll see a Garmin folder. So I'm going to click on the external and you see a Garmin folder. And I'm going to click on the internal and you see a Garmin folder. If you don't see like if you get a new chip, a new SD chip, and you format it, the Garmin folder won't be there. You'll have to create a new folder. I just right clicked and I can say new folder and you'd name it Garmin. If that's what you would do if you're doing a new chip. I already have a Garmin folder, so I'm not going to do that. But you got to find that Garmin folder on either the device or on the chip. Okay. And once you found that folder, and you can usually verify that folder by opening it, and you like here, if I open this up a little more, you can see I have all these TrickTracks maps already. You know, I have these image files already on that chip. So I know I'm in the right place because there's a .img file. If I look at the device itself and I look at the Garmin folder, there's at least one, there's a map, an open chest United States .image file. Here's a topo image file. So I know I'm in the right place. That's where my image files need to go. But suffice it to say, it's the Garmin folder, not up here, even though this says Garmin. You don't put the files here. In fact, here's one that's in the wrong place. So I'm going to delete it. Here it's, see, that's a TrickTracks file that's in the wrong place. I can either move it to the Garmin folder or I'll just move it there. But if you put it at the top level, the device won't see the map. It has to be in that Garmin folder for the most part. Okay, so I can see my device. I can see my chip. I'm going to copy it. What I usually do is I get this window so I can see this, and I go find the download file. Let me do it the hard way. Let me go to the download folder. Oh, come on. Let's see. Let me do it. So I'm looking for downloads, show in folder. So here's my downloads folder. Oh, come on. I'm right at the top of that damn screen. Okay. And here's my device. I got the Garmin folder open on the device, or the chip, I should say. I'm going to just take this TrickTracks map. I'm clicking and holding the left button. I'm dragging it over to the Garmin, and you can see it says copy to Garmin. I let off and it copies it. That's it. I'm done. There's nothing else to do except to verify it. So that's all you do. You're copying the file from your download folder or wherever else into the Garmin folder. Okay, that's all there is. Now, normally at this point, you'd unplug your device and you turn it on and you'd pan around to wherever the map is. You know, if the map's around you, then you don't have to pan around. But let's say the map's in 3 states over, you've got to, you know, zoom way out, pan over to the state, zoom way in, and see if the map shows up. That's the normal process. And if the map doesn't look the way you want it, you'd go back in and fix it in Basecamp or wherever. Then you'd re-export it. Then you'd rerun it through TrickTracks. Then you'd reload it after deleting it, the old one off of your device, because you don't want 3 of the same thing. And you'd look at it again. Most of you would probably just create one map and use it. Let me show you a little trick. If you're a Basecamp user, so I know that's a big if, you can see the maps without ever loading them. I see Doug shaking his head. You can see the maps without the TrickTracks maps without ever loading them on a device. You don't have to do anything. All you need is a SD chip reader. Let me see if I can freaking cable get it long enough here. Hold on, I can't see what my camera is showing you guys. Shit. Up. That's a USB cable sticking out, and I've got just that's like a $15 SD chip reader. Usually if you buy a couple chips, they'll give you one of those. That's just plugged into my so there's just a little SD chip sticking out of there sideways. If you plug that into your computer, it will show as a little disk. And I happen to name my little disk TrickTracks. That's probably confusing, but it's just a little thumb drive. That's a thumb drive is all it is, really. And if you copy again, it's got to have the name Garmin. If you copy a TrickTracks map onto that little thumb chip in a Garmin folder, and you get it there. So it looks just like you did it on a device, except you've done it on this little thumb drive or this little SD chip reader. If you go into Basecamp, that map will show on that little disk drive. Okay, so that little disk drive was named TrickTracks H. And if you double click on it, it says 860, that's a little different name, but it's the same one. If you double click on that, it will show you the map on TrickTracks. I mean on Basecamp, I'm sorry, Basecamp. And that's what it'll look like on your device. So if I zoom in here, it's a little bit scaly looking. You'll see those targets. So that's what it looks like. And you can see the arrows and everything. So I don't even have to use my device until I'm finally happy with it. If I want to just iterate on editing the waypoints, editing the tracks, going through TrickTracks, I just copy the TrickTracks map onto my little SD chip. I got to go out of Basecamp, go into Basecamp, and then it'll show these things. So here's Italy. I am working on one. Let's see if it shows up here. Hopefully it will. Maybe not. Maybe I didn't put anything in there. I don't know if I did.
Scott, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah. So
Can you,
does that sort of make sense? Let me just ask questions specifically about that SD chip. It's just a shorthand way of not having to use your device as the way to see it. But let me, before I'm going to keep this thought going. If you plug your Montana in and it has, you probably know this, if you plug a Garmin device in, the maps will show up in Basecamp. So like, here's a topo map that's on my Montana, but also you'll see all these TrickTracks maps that are also loaded on my Montana. And if I click on one of those, the same thing happens. I can see the map. So these 8 or 9 or whatever TrickTracks maps are on my Garmin Montana right now. So, okay, so questions. We went through we just did how do we get them on? And we built them and copied them on our device.
so Scott, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So this screen that you're showing now has multiple colored lines.
Yes.
Are those lines an individual TrickTrack file or are they multiple TrickTrack files?
This is a single map, single TrickTrack file called El Paso Part A. So it's just let's look up here. So I bought a topo map in Montana, Doug here, and I installed it, and it shows as topo map 100K. You can see that right here. And if I double click on the map, it'll show the map, although it zoomed out so much, I'm going to zoom in, and it'll show, whatever that map looks like. For TrickTracks, every dot image file is one map. And it'll show however many lines. Let's go back to Basecamp. Oh, we're in Basecamp. Let me show you. Okay. So for this webinar, this little list, they call it in Basecamp, they call it a list. This has 1 track, 2 tracks, and there's a little black line down here, 3 tracks, and there's another one, 4 tracks, right? So there's 4 tracks. Well, there might actually be more. Here's your tracks. There's 5 tracks in this file. When I export this and run it through TrickTracks, it's going to show exactly like this right here. It's going to show just like that. So you see every one of those lines shows up in the color that it was in Basecamp, but now it has arrows and it's fat. Instead of being a thin little line, oops, let me switch maps here.
But when you're in TrickTracks, how do you get it to process more than 1 GPX file at a time?
You don't.
Yeah.
So I still not following how you can have multiple, because doesn't each trick track process create one colored line?
No, it creates all the lines for the one GPX file. GPX file can have 1,000 tracks in it. So like this file right here, the one let me show you. This one called 2022 webinar. Let me get to a map that doesn't have a graphic.
Okay, so the list icon there is made up of multiple tracks.
right.
I'm with you. Okay, I got it.
That's right. So you can have, so this list file, if you look, I've got the screen's pretty small, but this list down at the bottom shows all these tracks. It's a track, that's a track, that's a track. And
So
you
each
have-
track is not its own GPX file. That's the list is the GPX file.
The list is a GPX file.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay, that answers that question.
And a
My
GPX file has tracks, routes, waypoints, a couple other things, but those are the big things. And it can have many of those in one GPX file. Which
Got it.
of course-
Okay, that answers that question. My next question is the
Good
way you've
question,
got it
Donovan.
shown. The way you've got it shown right now, you have your topo map showing
Yeah,
with
up here,
with tracks on top of it.
right.
Is there a way to show within Basecamp multiple maps at the same time?
No,
Okay.
it sucks.
Yeah, I mean, because it would be great to look at your detailed topo map with the TrickTracks map superimposed on it on Basecamp, but there's Yeah,
Affirmative.
I don't even think you can do that on Garmin.
Basecamp sucks. You can on Garmin sort of,
Yeah.
but it's only if the map is
It's layered.
transparent and yeah, but the short story is not really, yeah.
Right.
Something
So-
like Cal Topo where you can have multiple layers and stuff,
Correct.
that's a dream and it's never gonna happen on Basecamp.
So
So what I do is this, so I've got this thing here and then I'll go and I'll switch maps on the fly, you know, I'll do, okay, Topo 100K and then I'll switch the display resolution, you know, I'll go to high and so I just keep fooling with it to see what I want to see, you know, what I'm trying to see in that. And of course, we have no satellite view here. So if I want to see where, like, let's say I was questioning this place and I wanted to know where that is on the damn satellite, I usually drop a waypoint. I double click on the waypoint. That gives me the lat longe. Then I go over to, give me a second here. I go over to Google and I do whatever my choice. And so I still got that GPS there. I do that. So I pasted the lat longe in. That gets me to there. Then I switch to satellite mode. And now I can see that in satellite mode. That's how I do it. Now I know at least what now. So in satellite, I can see what's at that
It
waypoint.
was physical.
or Google Earth, you could do the same in Google
You can
Earth.
do it in Google Earth. You can do it in Ride with GPS, CalTopo, on and on and on. Use the best, fastest one you can.
Okay, one quick comment here.
Yeah.
Do you say that, to me, I'm thinking the best thing is load it on the chip in Basecamp, look at it like there. When you're satisfied with it, then just put the chip in the Garmin and
Yes,
go.
that's a great way to do it. That's a good way to do it too.
So you're taking out that extra step until you're finished, because sometimes it can be a pain to get my
Usually-
XD synced. So
Absolutely. So when you get good at this, which none of you should, because you shouldn't spend as much time as I do on it. But in the old days when I was getting new at TrickTracks and this, if you put the waypoints too close together, these things will here, like you'll see it. Let me go back to find it here. You'll see this is screwy looking. The targets will overlap. See that? That's a mess, right?
yeah,
And so that's what I want to know is, oh, that looks like shit. So I need to fix that in some way, like either get rid of some of those waypoints or whatever, because that's going to look like that on the device. But at some point, you
Lester.
kind of get used to that and you don't do it so much, but yeah, go ahead.
Unless they're absolutely necessary for you.
Right,
Too many waypoints.
right. Yeah, you know, you get waypoint fatigue when you're riding. You just start ignoring them, right? It's like anything in human nature. So yeah, and just to Dave Burke, let me tell you too, you can export anything. You can export a folder which has let me find something here, like You know, you can export, here's California BDR. Inside there is hundreds of things. You can export that entire folder and that becomes your TrickTracks. So that might have, you know, that folder has 313 tracks in it. If I exported that and turned it into TrickTracks, it would appear as a, you know, a 313 line thing. Hold on, I'm trying to find.
Okay, that's super helpful because I've been doing it one at a time, you know,
Right.
one waypoint at a time. And so that makes a lot of sense.
So let me turn this map to high and then I'll double click on California BDR. So that's what's in that thing. It's obviously too much because I've got multiple folders of different things like, you know, different years and stuff. But in theory, if you run that through TrickTracks, it's going to look like that, you know, with all those lines and that. So let me cover a couple other things here.
Scott, while you get into that, I have one question while we're still on this base
Sure.
camp trick track.
Sure.
Let's say that I get the 2023 Scooter Cannonball Trick Track Max from you, and I load it into Basecamp, start looking at it and say, you know what, here's a shortcut that I'm going to try.
Right.
How do I edit that into TrickTracks, or can I? I can't.
Well,
It's an image, isn't it?
Okay, so just there's a little bit of a side note for you guys who doesn't know what Mike's talking about, but I sold chips that had the scooter rally, the 2021 scooter rally on it that had a TrickTracks map on it, but it also had the GPX files at the same time. So you can't import a TrickTracks map into Basecamp. You can look at it.
Right.
You can't do anything with it except look at it. But the tracks, you would import them. So let's do that. Let's say, hypothetically, that let's just say this was the Scooter Cannonball tracks. Okay?
Right.
And this is what was the official route. The magenta was the route and the green was an option. If you wanted to do your own thing, you'd have to say, oh, I want to generate a route, a tracker route from here to here. Let's say you wanted to do that right there. So now I have a track and I say, oh, I don't want it to be gray. I'm going to open it and create it in a different color. So I want it to be red. Okay. So now I've just created that. And then maybe I'd put a waypoint there. So I'm hitting the W key. I drop a waypoint. It's a bus. So I don't want a freaking bus. I want a circle. And that is what you would do. You would be taking the master tracks and you'd edit your own stuff into them. That's what I did. And just a real quick thing to show you guys who do use Basecamp, you poor souls. Remember, everything has to be tracks, but the cheat is you go draw a route first if you can. So I'm dropping a route point there. I'm going to drop a route point way up here somewhere. Let it route for me. That's a route, useless to TrickTracks. But if I right click and say convert, create track from selected route, I now have a track. Okay, boom. So I just created a track. Now I have a track that meets the requirements of it's a track. And then I can set its color and oh, hold on, that's still give me 1 second. I'm struggling. I can get rid of the route. I don't need it. And now I have this track, which is all these points, and I can set its color again to whatever I want. So, and if you look at these, if you zoom way in on of course, a track, you see it's a lot of little points. It's not just, okay. So that's one cheat. Use routes when you can, and then when you're done with the route, you convert it to a track.
Oh.
Scott, when I get a TrickTrack map, does it have any map data? It's just the line that's overlaid on the map that I have on the device, right?
What do you mean by map data?
Like roads. Will it show roads? No, it's just the line.
But it overlays whatever maps you have.
Right.
So if you have a topo map in there, it just comes out as these.
Got it.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. It's just that big line over the top of your existing maps. Right. So it just obscures, it only obscures that much of your master map. Yeah, right. And that's why
that line will show up on whatever map I have.
Whatever map is underneath. So if you turn on a road map or a topo map or whatever, it's going to overlay that. And that's why I talk about shading, because sometimes these big targets, you want to be able to see your underlying map. And so that's why these shadings, if you ever wanted to change them or whatever, because if you took a 1 mile circle and it was too dense, you couldn't even see the roads and the streets and stuff. So normally this shading doesn't appear quite this dark on the device itself, and you can kind of see through it. So
if I created, say, a route in Mexico,
yep,
but my navigator on Garmin doesn't really have a good map for
doesn't
it,
matter. Doesn't
it'll
matter.
show up. It just won't have any roads, but
just-
I just follow that.
You follow the line until your line leads you to a closed gate.
There,
Now you got to find a road and you have no topo or anything. Now that's on you. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
right.
got it. Okay.
Other questions?
Well, the same thing is, if you've got these routes on this screen in
Track.
California,
Yes.
if you would start base camp and bring it up in Florida, you wouldn't see this until you get over to California. So there must be
Right.
some sort of embedded
Well,
information that tells you where on the Garmin map that thing is.
well, yeah, every map has a set of tiles, which are just little rectangles, and the rectangles just describe where they belong on the planet. So this little map is made up of a set of little rectangles that tell the device where it needs to be plotted when the device.
Okay, all right.
Right.
That's it.
Okay, before I forget, let me tell you a couple of little gotchas here. Okay, problems. Okay, a few problems that I see people run into. The most common problem is they take a TrickTracks map and they put it in the wrong place on the device and it won't show up. That's real common. So they put it in the wrong folder. They don't even copy it. They don't know how to copy it. I can't help with that other than to just say, put it in the right place. And okay, so there are cases if you copy too many TrickTracks maps to a device, it will only show, say, 7 or 10 or 20. So if you have 40 on there, you're going to see probably the first 20 you put on there, but it won't, it's not unlimited. The devices don't accept unlimited number of maps. So if you go, hey, I just put my new TrickTracks map on and it won't show up, well, you probably have a bunch of others on there or something. If you want to save the ones you have, just copy them on your desktop into a folder and you'll always have them. I mean, they don't have to stay on your device. They can stay in it. You know, the .img files can be in a folder called My Favorite Maps, and you can copy them back and forth anytime you want. The Macintosh. Go ahead.
Excuse me, there's like only a couple Garmin GPS units that will allow you to have a vast majority of maps. One is the Montanas and the other one is the Garmin 276. I know both of those units you can put like on 10,000 waypoints and yada, yada, yada. So you got a lot of maps on those.
Waypoints and
data.
maps are different counts in the devices. So maps are a separate count thing, you know, so if you're never going to see on the device how many maps. If you go look at the specs for a device, it doesn't ever say in Garmin stuff how many maps it can have. It'll say how many waypoints and tracks, but we're not talking about waypoints and tracks.
Right.
So, but the point is valid.
Okay.
The point is valid is that some devices allow, I've had 30 maps at least on my Montana, but I know a lot of devices limit it to like 7. So if, let's say you happen to have a case where you needed 15 maps, you'd have to carry a chip with you. You carry a chip with the first 7 and the last 7 or whatever, and you just swap the chips on the ride or whatever. That's one possibility. But anyway, the Macintosh, in its infinite wisdom, on some, we don't know why and when and how, and I'm not a big Mac guy, is generating these shadow files. So when you copy like a TrickTracks map file to a Garmin, Macintosh is creating a file with a dot in front of it with the same name that you can't see, and that counts as one of your maps. So, and if you delete, sometimes if you delete the TrickTracks file, the dot file doesn't get deleted. So sometimes you got to do an enema on your SD card or your Garmin if you're on a Mac, and I can't help you other than to say when stuff breaks, take it and plug it into a PC and see what's going on. Because I had a guy, if Don's still on, I don't see if he's still on, Don's still on. we couldn't get a map to show up. The most common problem you'll see is the map won't show up. It's on the device, it won't show up. Sometimes it'll even show up on Basecamp on the device. You turn the device, you unplug the device, turn it on, and the map won't show up. And you go, what do I do? And this is what we're talking about, is this troubleshooting. Are the files in the right place? Has the Macintosh created these shadow files? So we spent an hour or so figuring out that there was all these shadow files. We deleted them all off of his 276 or whatever it was, and boom, all the TrickTracks maps showed up. So I just
House cleaning.
yeah, let's see. Sometimes it happens even on my devices. I'll copy the TrickTracks maps to the external chip. It won't show. I'll take the same file and put it on the internal drive and it shows. So TrickTracks is not perfect. There's something that's a little incompatible here and there. Sometimes you have to power the device on and recopy the map. Not always, but on occasion. I think what works reliably the most is to create a chip, put the maps on it with only the Garmin folder, put the chip in your device, and that almost always works that way. But if you do like I do, I just keep dragging files back and forth. And so, okay, so we already did how to test it. You can turn on the GPS, pan to the area, zoom in and see the map to confirm that it's there. And you should always do that before you go riding. I mean, believe me, you don't want to think that it just worked. Alternatively, you can do what I said, is plug the USB SD chip reader in, make sure it shows up on, well, actually that doesn't help you. The chip, that doesn't let you, you can see the map in Basecamp, but that doesn't prove that it'll work on the device. In the end, you must always turn on the device and make sure the map shows up. Let me see if I can do that in front of the camera here, just for you, those of you who haven't done it.
While you're doing that, is there any Garmin like this? TrickTracks will work on a 660, the 500 series, and the XT without a problem, correct?
There is a list somewhere I published, maybe in the link to the written things. Let me give you the rule that I think is true, is if the device itself has an external chip that you can plug in and out, it will accept maps, TrickTracks maps or otherwise.
Okay.
So, because that's how Garmin sells their topo maps for $100 each. They used to send you a chip, and so they built the chips into all the devices that would accept maps. And a TrickTracks map is just another map. So if the device has a chip slot, it will. I can pretty much say it will accept TrickTracks maps. So that's about all I can say. I'm still waiting for my Montana to start up. That's typical, 5 minutes for a device to start up. I can't understand why, but.
Is that the new Montana?
No, it's an old 610 or whatever it said. Was it say 650T or something? Oh, there it is. Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to click on map and let's see. I'm going to zoom out. I'm hitting the minus key a little bit. I'm going to go see if that map shows up. Hopefully it does. Just my luck, it probably won't. Oop. Okay, there it is. So I can see it over there a little bit. And it looks pretty much like we saw on, I can see it's too bright. Oh, come on. I don't know why I can see it's too bright for you. So let's see if the camera will adjust. I don't know why it's doing that. Freaking camera. There we go, sort of.
There it is.
And then if you, yeah, there it is. It's pretty clear there. So yeah, you should, and then if you zoom way in, it'll start to look like the lines will get better. If you've ever used this, they don't look really good when you're just looking at the map like that. But if you once you're riding and the line is kind of straight ahead of you, it's not all jaggy looking. This Montana's really slow. I don't know what's going on with it. Won't even draw the map. Sorry, wasting your time. Let's get zoomed in on one of these targets here. Oops, shit. Okay, I'm gonna go close and then go away. See if it works. too bright. I don't know why. Come on, stupid camera. There we go. You can sort of see that. Anyway, okay, that's all I got. Ship me beer. I don't drink it, but I'll sell it. Any other questions? I mean, you know, how many of you guys use this or have used it or ever tried? I know Doug, I think, or Dave, I'm sorry, Dave, you've used it. Anybody else actually dropped a file on it and tried it?
I have several times.
Who's that said that?
On.
Oh, yeah, Mike. And Don, yeah, Don's on. Obviously, he does it. Yeah, you know, there's a big learning curve. That's why everybody doesn't do it. I mean, probably the bigger learning curve is just getting good enough at generating tracks, and Basecamp is the major hurdle. Let me give you a real quick cheat that I use depending on what I'm doing. I'll go to, oops, that was the wrong thing.
I put a link into a YouTube in the chat of a very good tutorial around Basecamp.
Yeah, I've done them too. So let me clear map here. I go to Ride with GPS. It's one of my favorite places to do, you know, somewhat easy, fast hacking because it does most of the dirt roads. And I'll, you know, I set it to
Right. GPS, yeah.
driving, avoid highways, and then, you know, going to start a route here, and, you know, I want to go to here, and that's halfway across the state, and then, you know, no, I want to go here. So this is such a great site for doing this kind of stuff when you want to do it. And as long as it meets your needs, you know, you zoom in, you can, I don't know if there's any smaller roads. Oh, I want to take that road. So, you know, this will get you 95% of almost anything you do, especially if it's just ADV type stuff, just paved and dirt roads that are known. Hey, I'm happy with that. Look at this. It gives me the mileage. It gives me the profile. Save it, you know, junk one or something. And that you can do this for free on this website. It's got satellite mode. It's got decent maps. So you can just literally start generating your own stuff, and you're happy with that. Export a GPX file, and boom, I've got a GPX file ready to go. I can drop that straight on TrickTracks if I want, although I think the default line color is gray, so that sucks. So I'll take that into Basecamp, just drag and drop here. And there's my junk one. There's it's gray. It's hard to see there, so I'll double click it. Favorite color is magenta. Who doesn't love pink? And now I'm ready to, so there it is. Now I'm ready to drop waypoints if I care to. I usually drop a few waypoints right at the critical 90-degree turns. And, you know, oops. So let's say I'm just doing this quickly, drop another one there. Zoom, drop one. Okay. And again, I'm just dropping waypoints, and a slick way to do all these waypoints at once. So I have all these waypoints over here. They're flags. I don't want flags. I select them all, right click, say open, set the thing to a circle. Now I'm ready to export that and get a TrickTracks map. So, you know, that Ride with GPS, I will use it as long as I can and then go into Basecamp. And let's say I want to do 10 tracks on a complicated thing. I'll do them here and then drop them into Basecamp, glue them together, weld them together, and all that. Because Basecamp, you know, you can do a lot with it if you're good at it, but it still has the shittiest maps in the world. It has no satellite mode. So, you know, I mean, that's the problem is, you know, I went off road here. It looks like somewhere. Oh, this thing too now shows you the dotted lines show you dirt roads when you plot them. So that's pretty cool, right? It didn't used to do that. So now
Thing with
what's that?
for me to make Basecamp work halfway decent, I got to use my North American maps off my GPS, plug it in there,
Right.
and then Basecamp read North American maps,
Right.
and it's
Well,
not.
Basecamp, you can, in most cases, take the maps off of your device and load them into Basecamp.
That's right.
And it's Garmin Express or something does that.
Garmin
So-
Express does that.
Which one?
Garmin Express does that. And
Yeah.
also Ride with GPS is available on smartphones.
Yeah, but laying out a route, thing's not, yeah, you can use the route you created, but you can't create
Correct.
routes on a phone.
That's correct.
So here's all the maps I've collected over time, and oh, by the way, your TrickTracks maps, when the device is plugged in or when that chip is plugged in, show up here too, which I find annoying, but they do show up. So, yeah, there's that.
I like,
What's
all right,
that?
I like the ride. I like the ride with maps.
Yeah, it's they're good, and let's see, where did it go here? I lost it.
I think it'll make it a lot easier than the Garmin map thing.
This is pretty good, and then, okay, you get stuck. I know, oops, sorry, didn't want to do that. If, you can even do stuff like, oh, I'm in satellite mode and let's see if I can find something here. Let's just say there's a trail maybe right there. You can take this and turn on draw lines, and now it'll draw lines, straight lines. So you can make it doesn't even have to have a track. You can get it to follow stuff, and that's not quite Basecamp, but it's close. And then, so these things you can take and split them if you just drag them right in the middle, so you can it'll add a point if you drag in the middle, so you can get really refined, like, let's say I wanted to, so it's got a lot of capability if you're patient with it, right? So again, I'm just dragging and clicking and dragging these things, because I know there's no route here. It's not going to route this thing, but I can get something close enough. And then when I get back on the street, or back on a road, I can turn follow roads on and go find a road again. Let's see, find a road and click here. And I think it just draws a straight line to it. Again, this is all dirt, so shows his stripes down here. Anyway, a little off subject, but none of the tools are perfect. Oh, so why not use this all the time? Well, the biggest flaw in this thing is it's one freaking track at a time. So I want to draw it now. I want to have another track go over here. I can't do it. I got to have. So, like, let's say this was red and I wanted a green track going here. I can't do it. I got to draw another map in Ride with GPS, and I have no reference point to this map. I'm back to a blank screen again, trying to find out, where do I want to take off of this? So this tool is great, except it's not. So.
Oh.
Yeah. You'll quickly, if you got a one-track problem, one-track mind, this is great. But if you want to do options, and who doesn't want to do options, this will not work well for you. You'll have to do them one at a time, paste them into Basecamp, and then weld them together, or put them in one list, or whatever you want to call it. Just wrecked it for you, didn't I, Doug? You thought she was a $20 hooker. She was a blow-up doll, man.
Oh, this $2 bill.
Sorry, I hope there's no females on here. Anyway.
Well, wait a minute. The Ride for GPS, for the majority, if you're just going to plot a ride
Yes.
up into North Florida.
Yes, it's great. It's great. It's really good for that.
Right. But for you guys, if you want to go through Death Valley and then do a cutoff.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, it's just what we got. These guys supposedly sort of have some half-assed, half-baked multi-track thing they've been working on. I looked at it the other day and I said, I can't even use it, so it's.
Well, Basecamp hasn't been updated. I thought Garmin was going to move away from that and do their Garmin Explorer or whatever.
They have, but that's